So, Chapter 26 of Boruto's Two Blue Vortex is out, and Mamushi, also known as the Bug Shinju, is on the move. Or at least, he's about to be on the move. Because it was revealed in a conversation between Kashin Koji and Shikamaru that Mamushi was going to be invading Konoha in 1 week's time, and his target was Ada. Now, the idea of a battle against Mamushi has been on the horizon now for a couple of months, because before the battle between Jura, Boruto, and Kawaki was even wrapped up, Kashin Koji got an update to all of his 10 Paths predictions, and amongst those updates seemingly was an image of Mamushi walking down what appears to be a street in Konoha. But up until Chapter 26, we had no way to confirm exactly where Mamushi was or what he was doing. However, it has now been certified that what we saw all those chapters ago in Kashin Koji's new 10 Paths prediction was Mamushi invading Konoha trying to find Ada. And while we all knew that that was probably exactly what we were being shown, now that it has been confirmed, some questions need to be asked, the most important of which being, how is Mamushi allowed to stir up problems inside Konoha? I mean, we know that Konoha has been designated as a safe zone by Jura, who is supposedly the leader of the Shinju. This rule is so ironclad that bookstore owners have been told to treat Jura like a #1 customer, because the upper brass of Konoha understand that Jura simply wants Konoha to be a hub of information right now, and therefore people like Sarada and Himawari are safe within the walls of Konoha. And yet Mamushi is launching an invasion. So how does that happen? Well, today I have 3 possible answers that range from the idea that Jura may not be in charge of Mamushi, all the way to the moratorium on Konoha might be over and all-out war might be coming to the streets of the ninja world's biggest city. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today, so with no further ado, let's get directly into Boruto's final war has begun. But before we get to talking about possibly the end of Konoha as we know it, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series in the 4th wall link in my description below. That is 30 extra minutes of my face every single week. But before we get into all that, today we're gonna talk about a reoccurring sponsor to the page, Raycon. See, we all remember back to school shopping, right? New notebooks, new backpack, new shoes. And while I may not be in school anymore and haven't been for a long time, I still love that feeling of a reset when the fall comes around. And therefore this year, I'm doing a little something called Back to Cool. And Raycon's open-ear earbuds are instrumental into making me settle into my new routines and feel a whole lot cooler while doing them. See, Raycon's open-ear earbuds keep your ear canals open, but don't compromise on sound quality whatsoever. This way you can remain aware of coworkers or traffic or people you're having a conversation with without sacrificing any quality from whatever music or podcast you may be listening to, like a Tacos Anonymous. On top of that, they are super lightweight and fit so snug, so whether you're going on a run at the gym or just sitting down at your desk, you never gotta worry about them coming out. And these open-ear earbuds live up to Raycon's name of delivering premium sound quality comparable to all the other earbud companies at half the price. On top of that, these open-ear earbuds, like all of Raycon's new products, have multi-point connectivity, meaning they can be connected to multiple Bluetooth devices simultaneously. With 36 hours of battery life between the earbuds and the charging case, you can listen all day long. So what are you waiting for? Over 3 million customers already love Raycon, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee, so if you don't like what you're listening to, you can send it back. Click the description in the box or go to buyraycon.com/nchammer23open to get 20% off. That's buyraycon.com/nchammer23open. Honestly, with how sweaty I get on my runs, not having something in my ears is incredible. I cannot get these things out for the life of me. So, according to Jura, there are a lot of things inside of Konoha that deserve to be preserved. Whether it's the buildings, the history, the science, or the books, Jura has designated Konoha as a place of learning. And as he is an incredibly young life form, trying to absorb as much information into his head as possible, these wellsprings of information, places like giant hidden ninja villages, present Jura almost endless opportunities to learn things about the world and humanity, emotions, history, archaeology, and so much more. And we know for a fact that Jura is not done learning, because in chapter 26 there is a somewhat long conversation between Hidari, Jura, and Mamushi about information. We see Jura reading a fictional novel and beginning to cry as he talks about how experiencing a glimpse of love through Matsuri's feelings for Konohamaru opened up a floodgate of possibilities of emotions he could feel, and thus now he's able to read things like fictional novels and have his heart move. But he goes on to say that the information that he's able to glean about love from these fictional novels isn't enough. He needs to know exactly what love is and how to control it. And so it's safe for us to assume that Jura's not done learning things, and therefore it's safe to assume that he wouldn't want Konoha destroyed, because Konoha is where he gets to learn things, mostly through the bookstores that exist there, but there are plenty of other things and other ways that he could learn inside of Konoha. But if Jura is in charge, then why is Mamushi allowed to walk into Konoha under the precedent of destroying it to find Ada? Well, let's dive into those three options that we teased earlier, going from what I identify as the least interesting option and working our way up to the most interesting option. The first option, which is unfortunately a highly likely option, is that Mamushi is acting solo. See, it was established in chapter 26 that Mamushi and Jura have fundamentally different outlooks on information and information's necessity in the growth of the Shinju. See, Jura wants to consume everything, be it history textbooks or fictional novels, because every piece of information allows for Jura to understand the world around him a little bit better. And the better that Jura understands the world around him, the better he's able to control the world around him. See, Jura believes that he can't be affected by things that he deems as subjective, like love, if he understands love to the point where he's able to break it down and control how it feels inside of him. He views these human emotions as a weakness. However, in order to make sure that he's never affected by said weakness, he has to understand exactly, logically, how these emotions work. However, while Jura is flipping through any and all kinds of books to try and cram as much information into his head as possible, we see in chapter 26 that Mamushi, well, is just reading porn. Well, maybe not porn, but he's at least reading a swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated. And thus, Mamushi is being highlighted as much more bestial in nature than Jura, and this is displayed perfectly in the opinions that he has about gathering information about the surrounding world. See, Mamushi isn't all that interested in trying to learn how humans work and how emotions feel inside of you in order to control them. Rather, all that Mamushi cares about is the fact that he knows he wants to consume Ada. See, in a way, Mamushi is actually closer to the ideal life form that Jura talked about a couple of chapters ago than Jura. Jura, just a few chapters ago, identified emotions as weakness and is now crying over the plot lines of fictional novels. But in response to seeing Jura crying over these fictional novels, Mamushi says simply that he wants to consume Ada because he wants to be able to control her excellent genetics. Now, this is essentially to say that the sex drive that made Bug attracted to Ada back when Bug was still Bug and not Mamushi has been crossed over with his primal instinct as a divine tree or a Shinju to consume the person most important to Bug. And therefore, when Mamushi talks about wanting to control the genetics of Ada, he's kind of tongue-in-cheekily talking about wanting to reproduce with Ada. However, because he's a Shinju, the bestial part of his human brain, his sex drive, has become mixed with the bestial part of his Shinju brain, which is focused on consumption. But Mamushi's not curious about why he feels this way. He understands that he wants to control Ada, and he doesn't have to ask questions about that. And therefore, Mamushi is seemingly much more separated from the human emotions that Jura is feeling and identifies as weaknesses than even Jura. Mamushi even goes so far as to say that information is not important. There's a possibility that Mamushi understands that he shouldn't fly off to Konoha and destroy it while looking for Ada. There's an equal possibility that he simply doesn't care because he doesn't see the value in Konoha that Jura sees, and therefore he's simply operating solo, all the while not worrying about what Jura wants and doesn't want. Now, the other possibility that falls under the umbrella of this first theory is that Mamushi simply isn't beholden to the wants of Jura. See, obviously Jura is the strongest amongst the Shinju. We know this empirically. But just because Jura is the strongest amongst the Shinju does not mean that there is a concrete leadership structure. Yes, if we had to pick one leader for the Shinju, we would pick Jura as a leader, but we don't know if the other Shinju have picked a leader at all. Choosing a leader is inherently a very human thing to do. It implies structure and governmental procedures. And as a Shinju are trying to return sentient life to a more bestial form, the building out of this kind of structure by electing a leader may not be something that they would do. Therefore, Jura may not have the right to tell Mamushi to not go to Konoha to try and capture the person that he wants to consume, because fundamentally that is what Jura would be telling Mamushi. I mean, after all, it was Jura who told all of the Shinju they should search their hearts to find the person they want to consume, and then they should dedicate themselves to consuming that person, because only after they consume the person that their heart is telling them they want to eat do they have the possibility of understanding why they exist in the first place. And the reality of the situation is Ada's not leaving Konoha anytime soon. Ada understands as well as anybody that Konoha has been designated as a safe area, and she is terrified of Mamushi because she's one of the few people who's come face to face with a person who wants to consume her, because Mamushi is able to see Ada whenever she's using her Senrigan to watch him in real time. But if Ada was never going to leave Konoha, then Mamushi would never have the opportunity to capture and consume the person that his heart is telling him to capture and consume. And therefore Mamushi, if he stopped from going in Konoha and starting a ruckus, would be stopped from ever completing his believed purpose. And therefore Jura's desire for information would stop Mamushi from ever achieving the thing that Jura told him to do in the first place. So Mamushi, who may operate as an independent entity, but obviously take into consideration what he wants more than what Jura wants. However, there is also the possibility that Mamushi showing up in Konoha is an act of open defiance against Jura, which brings us to our second theory. See, there's absolutely the possibility that Jura has told Mamushi straight up, yeah, I know Ada is inside of Konoha, but I need Konoha to remain intact. Eventually, Ada will leave Konoha, and when she does, then and only then can you abduct her, unless Jura has essentially told Mamushi that my desire is more important than yours. And if this is the case, Mamushi showing up in Konoha, boldly walking down the street looking for Ada, could be an open act of defiance against Jura that could possibly sever his ties to Jura and Hidari forever. Also that he can make a desperate attempt to consume the woman that he believes he loves. This would also explain why Mamushi ends up coming into Konoha alone. Well, yes, Mamushi has never really had a partner. I mean, Ryu had Matsuri, Hidari has Jura, and Mamushi has always kind of been by himself because he's creepy and everyone hates him. Kashin Koji didn't mention anything to Shikamaru about the idea of Mamushi being backed up. He simply said Mamushi is going to invade Konoha in about a week. Here are his abilities and how to counter them. Not, hey, Mamushi's gonna invade in about a week, and after you're done defeating Mamushi, Hidari and Jura are also gonna show up. It's just Mamushi. Now, considering the fact that Jura is able to see through the eyes of all of the other Shinju, it's not like Mamushi invading Konoha would go beyond the detection of Jura. And therefore, if Jura had any interest in making sure at least some of the Shinju survive, it would make sense that he would back up Mamushi, unless Mamushi was openly acting against his will. It also means that when Mamushi is inevitably defeated, there won't be some other Shinju there to collect his soul thorn. But what if Mamushi doesn't die in Konoha? What if after being defeated he retreats, presumably back to the other Shinju and Jura and Hidari? Well, there's a possibility that when he gets back, he may not have allies to retreat to, as his blatant disobedience towards the will of Jura could sour the relationship between Mamushi and Jura forever. And actually, this idea makes a fair amount of sense. See, Bug most likely is not getting his soul thorn back. One, he got turned into a tree at the Kara hideout, which is in a different dimension from Earth. And two, even if he was trapped in a tree somewhere in Earth's dimension, no one cares enough about Bug, the Kara outer, to hike his soul thorn all the way to his tree and bring him back to life. Code, who's probably the only person who knows where Bug is, definitely doesn't care. The Shinju have no reason to give a soul thorn back to a tree, and Bug was antagonistic to Konoha. He was a supporter of Jigen. He helped in the creation of the cyborgs. There's literally no one who'd want to and no reason to bring Bug back to life. And therefore, when Mamushi is taken out, his soul thorn will also probably be taken out. Maybe as a way to show that battling against Hidari is actually going to be somewhat precarious, because there's a possibility that his soul thorn could be destroyed and therefore Sasuke could never come back to life. Therefore, Mamushi's end will probably also be Bug's end, which, like I said, makes a fair amount of sense because both Bug and Mamushi have been painted as despicable, low-down characters. Bottom of the barrel characters that we should feel no empathy towards. And therefore, Mamushi retreating from an attack that he launched would not only be on brand, but it would open up the door to something like Jura finishing him off, which would also thematically exist as a physical reminder of the differences that they have on ideas like love and information. As Jura snuffing out Mamushi, who openly told him that information in the collection of it is not important, would be Jura physically arguing his point. You didn't think information was important, so you openly disobeyed me, attacked the place I told you not to attack, and destroyed some of the things I could have learned from. Now, as penance, you die. Oh, but Nick, Jura wouldn't kill Mamushi, he's a Shinju. Mind you, this is the same Jura who did not step in to save either Ryu or Matsuri. Jura didn't step into the battle in the Land of Wind until he realized Boruto had hopped onto the scene. However, as both Ryu and Matsuri were covered head to toe in claw marks, Jura could have popped out whenever he wanted. He has no feelings towards the other Shinju. That's the point he's been trying to make the entire time. And fundamentally, what's the difference between not saving people who you could have versus pulling the trigger yourself? There really isn't one. It's literally the entire point of the trolley problem. And after finishing off Mamushi after his battle against somebody like maybe Daemon, Jura could either take Mamushi's soul thorn for himself or simply destroy it, which could either have the benefit of improving Jura's strength or establish the pertinent threat that while fighting against Hidari, there is a possibility that his soul thorn is destroyed and therefore Sasuke is lost forever. Now, this sounds like a kind of best case scenario, as it would literally be the Shinju eliminating each other. There are worst case scenarios here, like our third theory, which is that the moratorium on not attacking Konoha is over. See, there's a possibility that Mamushi, walking into Konoha and looking for Ada and therefore possibly destroying large swaths of it, could have actually been greenlit by Jura, therefore implying that Jura doesn't necessarily care if Konoha is destroyed in the process of this fight. See, this would mean that in 1 week's time, when Mamushi is supposed to invade Konoha, Jura has maybe hit the top of the threshold of information he believes he can glean from Konoha, and therefore as Jura's been able to wring all of the information he possibly could out of Konoha, Shinju will move on from their information collection phase to their destruction and consumption phase. And Mamushi attacking Konoha looking for Ada is the first step in that change of process. Now, this would be a worst case scenario for a multitude of reasons. The first of which is that Konoha would be able to be turned into a battlefield really whenever the Shinju want. Well, yes, Konoha has done a good job on trying to keep track of claw marks being left either near Konoha or inside of Konoha. Fundamentally, tracking down every single claw mark is an almost impossible task, especially when all the Shinju need to do is send a claw grime to run close to Konoha and then pop out of the claw grime so they can kill the wall guards and then be in Konoha as easy as, well, that, and therefore, whenever the Shinju want, a battle can be brought to Konoha. On any side of Konoha, maybe in the dead center of Konoha, anytime, anywhere, and there's no way for Konoha to prepare. Now, this kind of threat would be terrifying if it was just code and an army of claw crimes that could pop out either close to Konoha or inside Konoha whenever. However, we're not talking about code and an army of claw crimes. No, we're talking about 3 claw mark users that are all more powerful than code: Mamushi, Hidari, and Jura. And thus, this idea of an anytime offensive that Konoha doesn't know how to prepare for is one of the most unique and probably biggest challenges Konoha has ever faced. On top of this, if the moratorium on not attacking Konoha has been lifted, it means that Sarada and Himawari can become targets wherever, whenever, while they're asleep, while they're training, while they're eating, while they're alone. And considering the fact that Himawari lives alone, that is a particularly large threat for her, especially when you consider the fact that both Sarada and Himawari believe themselves to be safe. See, the Shinju hold on to all the power here. When Jura decides that Konoha is no longer a safe place for all of the people hiding inside of Konoha, it's not like he's going to write a letter and tell everybody there. It's just one day Konoha will be attacked, Himawari and Sarada and Ada will be targeted, and then that's that. And this is probably, narratively, why Mamushi is being sent first. As with Mamushi being sent first to attack Ada, there is now a narrative reason for both Himawari and Sarada to start getting prepared for being attacked themselves. And therefore the two of them can either get on guard or leave Konoha altogether, because being in Konoha, A, no longer gives any protection whatsoever, and B, allows for Jura and Hidari to know exactly, kind of, at least where you are. Oh, and C also opens the floodgates to the possibilities of Konoha being destroyed in a massively destructive battle. And that's the thing, if the moratorium on fighting inside of Konoha is lifted and a dual-prong attack is launched by Jura and Hidari, we are much closer to the idea of Konoha being destroyed in some kind of massively destructive battle than we previously thought, as it could very well be the battle against Jura and Hidari that leads to Konoha's destruction, and Kawaki may be uncorking his strength to try and defeat Jura once and for all. Then again, who knows? Why do you guys think Mamushi is able to launch his offensive inside of Konoha in 1 week's time, and what do you think the results will be? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, from me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am officially over the flu, so I'm gonna go on a run.